everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Ciphr. It's our Employment Rights Bill update. I'm thrilled to have so many of you with us today. Clearly lots of interest in this topic. And I'm also thrilled to have our team of experts with us today from Ciphr. I'm joined by Claire, our regulatory analyst, and Gwennon, our head of people operations. And Gwennon, you would like to introduce Alicia, our people relations manager, is that right?
It is, yes. So we've obviously been looking at the Employment Rights Act for quite a while now, and we are in a position where we've been able to cover for maternity. So because of the Employment Rights Act, we decided to change the way that we structured our team. So we brought in Alicia, who is our people relations manager. So bringing in somebody with that employment relations background so that we can concentrate on our employee relations in the next couple of years has been quite important to our planning for the next couple of years. So please meet Alicia. So she's very new to this, so please be kind to her.
Thank you.
Bless her, we've dropped her right in the deep end.
Thanks, Gwennon. And Alicia, it's great to have you with us for your first webinar, and probably the first of a few this year, as there's so much change on the horizon.
Absolutely.
We'll take a quick look at today's agenda. I'll whiz you through about Ciphr's products and services in case you haven't come across us before, and then I'll hand over to our team. We're going to recap on changes so far, changes coming from April. We'll take a deep dive into SSP changes, and then look further ahead to what's coming later in the year and 2027 and beyond. And then we've got kind of a checklist for your next steps. We are here to take your questions. I can see some of those coming in already. Do send them in using the Q&A panel, and we'll get to them as we can, either with an audio response or with a text response. So look out for those. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll email that recording to you later today. In case you're new to Ciphr, here's an overview of all our products and solutions. They cover the entire employee lifecycle, from recruitment and onboarding through to central HR software, payroll software and bureau, benefits, e-learning, and much more. Just to look in on our HR payroll software integration, there's a seamless integration between those two solutions. So there's instant data transfer from the HR software through to payroll, with no more manual changes, no spreadsheets, no extra effort, just systems that are always in sync and under your control. We also offer a range of e-learning courses, including some that are relevant to what we're discussing today in relation to the Employment Rights Act. So our e-learning offering includes content on sexual harassment, bullying and harassment, creating a speak up culture, and much more. If you'd like a free trial of our sexual harassment course, you can click the link on your screen now, and one of our experts will be in touch after the webinar to arrange that with you. And looking back at our HR software, there's a new inbuilt data analytics tool in there to help you explore data points more effectively, and you can get right to work at analysing the outputs rather than compiling the reports. And because it's a new feature, we're regularly adding new functionality within that feature, so lots to come later in this year. Again, if you're interested in looking at our solutions in more detail beyond the e-learning free trial, you can feel free to email us at info@ciphr.com or visit our website to find out more. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Claire, Gwennon and Alicia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine, and good morning to everybody. So this is a follow-up to the webinar that we did last year. So we're going to have a little whiz through everything that we now know in a bit more detail. But obviously there is still stuff that we don't know. So just starting off by saying to you, this Employment Rights Act, it's been coming a long time. So initially it was published, 18 months ago now, Employment Rights Bill 2024. It's taken them a while to get it through, to receive Royal Charter. But they haven't changed the timeline at all. So when they originally published it in 2024, we had a timeline taking us right through until the end of 2027. We still have exactly the same schedule. It's been a few tweaks in there and a few bits dropped out, but everything else is still going to that same timeline. So it's a bit squished now, unfortunately. We've got a bit more to do in a bit less time. So why does this matter then? what is it we need to understand about the Employment Rights Act? It's a significant piece of legislation change. It affects millions of workers. It looks to change the legislation from principles to evidence-based. It's preempting and communicating requirements are going to be key. But the key thing for us is that it impacts all employees. So where do we start? Ladies, over to my colleagues here who are we're gonna chip in and do bits and pieces. My Gwen and Alicio are definitely the HR experts here. I do the legislation and regulatory stuff within Ciphr. So I'm going to hand over to the ladies to give me a comment on this.
Yeah, so obviously those people that would have joined us on previous webinars will know that I've been banging on about this. Let's prepare, let's put together a timeline, put together a tracker. So I don't want to repeat myself, but for those people who are new to the webinar, it's what we've been suggesting all along is to keep abreast of everything that's going on within the Employment Rights Act. Put together a list of all the things that you think that will affect you and your business, and prepare a timeline of when you will need to be changing policies, changing the way you may be procedurally within your business. So put together a tracker and a timeline and just tick them off as you go along. Don't wait until the very last minute and suddenly go, oh, this is now happening and we need to change it. So there's going to be a lot of repetition in this, where we're saying update your policies, train your managers, and look at your processes and how you are communicating with your employees. So you will hear that a lot from us all the way through this presentation, and I make no apologies because it is very important. So if you could go on to the next slide for me.
Sure. So this is where we are looking at what has happened so far. So originally we were told there would be 2 implementation dates per year. So now we're going to tell you what we've done so far. So Alicia, I think you're taking us through this one.
No, this one's a me one.
Oh, sorry, Gwen.
Sorry.
I'm wrong.
That's fine. So obviously the things that have already happened are mostly around trade union representation. So it's the removal of that minimum service level. So that will obviously affect it will affect mostly people in the public sector and those that have unions. So there's going to be greater disruption for those organisations that had that minimum service protection before. It was that little bit of a protection there. So that's been removed. And there's also going to be a likelihood that there'll be more of a cost for you to be able to maintain those levels that you are required to do by possibly bringing in temporary workers and having to pay them more. So additional costs that will be incurred from that. If you go on to the next slide for me, Claire. Sorry. And then obviously just come through in the last week or so, we've had more oh gosh, I'm going to lose my voice in a minute, more trade union changes. So quite a few things will be coming along the road, sort of like April and in October, but basically industrial action is going to become easier. So you'll have less notice. So HR teams will now have about 30% less time to respond to industrial action. There's going to be a lower threshold for industrial action. So people that, if you are a company within a unionised environment at the moment, I think it's critical just to be trying to address concerns quicker than previously, because you haven't got as much protection as you used to have. You're going to have less notice and less time to prepare and get that cover in place. I'm going to hand over to Alicia, who is going to talk about the paternity leave changes, because I am actually going to talk a little bit more about trade unions in a little while.
So there's some significant paternity leave and parental leave changes on the horizon, but some people might already be feeling some of them, as in April it will come in that employees will get a day 1 right to their paternity leave. However, it's now the 24th of February, and the ability to give notice for that 6th of April leave actually kicked in on the 18th of this month. So some teams might have already had some notices and requests for that come in, and we're going to see probably an uptick in people putting those in. Policies will need to be updated, as you're going to hear us say, as Gwen has said many times today, so that that reflects the wording ahead of the April change, as well as also being aware that there's going to be a temporary reduction of notice to 28 days. Now, they haven't told us when that notice is going to revert back. They've just said that this change is a temporary one for the foreseeable. So it's going to change a little bit again, much shorter notice in terms of what you have to deal with. So in resource planning and allocation as well, bearing that in mind that you may end up with someone going off on paternity a bit quicker than we're used to. And also good to communicate to it people who is relevant to that their leave rights are changing, but statutory pay is not becoming a day one right at this stage. So although they will have the ability to take leave, it won't be paid through statutory paternity pay at this time. And unpaid parental leave is having similar changes too.
Mm-hmm. Good. And then we've obviously got the April changes coming our way. So Claire, did you want to just...
Sorry.
I think we might be both clicking on
Got a
things.
bit of a gremlin going on here.
Too many clicks.
Yeah, no, we can move on to the April changes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Gwennon. So yes, we're soon going to be in April. It's going to creep up on us pretty quick. So what we have got coming through from April. So we've got the repeal of the levy that trade unions and employers associations pay. We're going to come back to these in a bit more detail in a minute. We've got, that's from the 1st of April. From the 6th of April, we've got changes to redundancy, protective awards, strengthening protections for whistleblowers, simplifying trade union recognitions. Alicia's already mentioned some of the parental leave changes, and we're looking at action plans for gender pay gap and menopause reporting. But also the big one that everybody is talking about at the moment is the SSP changes. Then from the 7th of April, now bearing in mind this is all one implementation date effectively, we have the introduction of the Fair Work Agency. So we're going to take you through all of those bits in a little bit more detail now. So we're going to start with the trade union changes. Yeah,
so I'm going to actually cover a few, not just the April ones, because they sort of all will interact with each other. So obviously we've got the repeal of the levy of the trade union employer association. Oh, I can never say this one, the certification officer. So we've also got the electronic and workplace balloting of trade unions and the simplifying of the trade union membership process. So if you are a unionized environment already, you'll probably not feel too much of some of these pinches to begin with, but then it's sort of like the knock-on effects that you're going to have going on. So if you're a company with an employer association, you'll no longer be paying that annual levy of the 2.5% of your company income. There will be less chance of having those third-party audits coming into play, and but what will happen is it will become easier for smaller groups of disengaged employees pushing through for unionisation. So what will probably happen is that we will find more what we used to be ununionised businesses becoming unionised, because there's less requirement to of people to be able to push that through. So what we're basically suggesting is that you try and engage with employees at an earlier stage. Maybe look at putting together some staff forums, which will potentially avoid people actually pushing for that unionisation and then just do regular temperature checks with your employees. And if we can move on to the paternity for Alicia.
Yes. So as of April, as mentioned, we then have the day one paternity leave comes in. So that 26-week service leave requirement will be a distant memory at that point. So it's going to be important to bear in mind that anyone you hire around that stage could take paternity leave fairly close to starting. So thinking about probation periods, thinking about training managers and how they're planning to handle it, it's good to start planning and prepping for that for sure. You want to make sure that managers are extending probation periods for anyone who takes paternity leave in that period and are treating them fairly so that you don't get any negative impact. Alongside it, ordinary parental leave is also becoming a day one right in April, so that 1 year service requirement will also be a distant memory. And again, it has that impact on resource planning, on availability and staffing. The restrictions on taking paternity leave after shared parental leave will also be going. So again, periods of leave might be more frequent or might be longer, and we may see more people looking to take additional leave to be with their families. And then we will also have bereaved partners paternity leave coming in as well. So historically, where that's been confined to the mother's side of things, we will then have the partner's side as well. At this time, that bereaved partner's paternity leave, we don't know if that's going to be paid or unpaid. We're waiting for updates on that. So good to keep an eye out, good to be aware that there may be additional costs there, there may not be at this time. We're not quite sure, but we're keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, as with lots of this, there is an element of we don't know because we've not been told yet. So you will hear that as a repeated theme throughout this presentation as well. We're doing our best with what we've got. So we also know that from the 7th of April, we're going to have the introduction of the Fair Work Agency. So what is this? This is a new enforcement body. They're an enforcement body for employment rights. So they're going to cover minimum wage, statutory holiday and SSP, employment agency regulations, and they're going to have the powers to inspect, investigate and enforce. So what does that mean? In my head, that means they're going to come in and check we're doing it right. But from your perspective, from an HR perspective, ladies, what do you think?
Yeah, not much is actually known about them yet. So we don't know whether these, all we know is that they're going to be formed in April. What we don't know is when their powers will actually become enforceable. What we do know, or what's been hinted at, is that they will be looking at, as you say, looking at all of those things that are already things that we should be, complying with. It's just that there was never one body that would actually make sure that we're doing it, and it was only waiting for somebody to raise either a tribunal or to raise a complaint to maybe the HMRC, and you might have gotten a HMRC audit. What will now happen is more likely that they will have more inspections. You will probably have there will be more guidance. So what they will be saying is, because we're now giving you more guidance and we're setting expectations, we actually expect you to be 100% following those guidance. So there will be a greater need for accuracy. We will need to make sure that we keep very good record keeping, to just make sure that we're compliant with the new sick pay regulations, the national minimum wage, and any of the holiday pay legislation, that they can come in and just inspect and look at what you're doing. So the key is going to be the record keeping, I think.
Yeah, and I think we've had a conversation around this. they're going to need to justify their existence. They're going to have targets to meet. So yeah, it's the same as any other body. They need to justify why they're there. So be prepared for additional audits. Look at what you're doing. Make sure that your record keeping is clear and concise, so that you don't fall foul of it. And actually watch out for that extra guidance, because as soon as that comes out, and what we will do is we're going to commit to you guys that as and when additional guidance comes out and we've got more to tell you, we will run more of these webinars. So, and we can take a little breath here. What other changes are coming through then?
I'll give Gwennon a bit of a break and pause to catch her breath. So we are the bits coming. As mentioned before, the Collective Redundancy Protective Award is going to be doubling later this year. So there's going to be a lot more pressure and eyes on any redundancy processes. You need to have that gold standard documented process to make sure that you're covered, as it's going to be a significant jump in costs for businesses should that then be triggered. And on a completely different note, there's a lot of protection for whistleblowers, specifically in relation to sexual harassment. So historically, it has not been treated in the same way that typical whistleblowing has, but it will soon become that any disclosures around sexual harassment will have the same protection as a normal whistleblower. So support, making sure, again, processes are top tier, but also you've got any relevant for staff and HR teams, so they feel dealing with those conversations and supporting those employees. And also bearing in mind any non-disclosure agreements or settlement agreements, those, if used, won't be enforceable. So if the employee harassment, those will not be relevant. So very much have to make sure that we're all top tier on that. And then coming in provisionally at first on an optional basis are action plans for the gender pay gap and menopause. They're voluntary from April, but they will become a legal requirement in 2020. As always, a ton of guidance on exactly what they want in there, but it's going to be going above that reporting level rather than just talking about the numbers in the business. It's going to be very much about having that proactive mindset and putting forward, this is what we'll do in this situation. And it will apply across the board. So we've been talking a little bit about different companies and who it might impact. And even if you are in a field that is traditionally male dominated, there's still going to be a need for you to have in 2027 that menopause action plan. So I know we've been discussing whether it's a good idea to use 2026 as like a test run for it. Put one together, then see what guidance comes out, so that when in 2027 it's a mandatory thing, you then feel quite confident in pushing that out. You've got the foundations of it rather than having to put it together at short notice.
I think it's about knowing that you actually have the data to be able to complete them, isn't it? It's identifying what additional data you might need, or does your system hold it? It's certainly something that we're looking at. Do we have all of this data available to be able to support these requirements? So good plan to try it. I think try it this year, and mandatory next year.
We've just had a question in the chat just to say, is it for businesses of all sizes? And I think that's a really good question. It's worth knowing that it will apply to all businesses. So
absolutely, unlike the gender pay gap reporting, which is limited to employers of 250 employees or more, this doesn't have that caveat in there at all. So great question, thank you for that.
I suppose it'll be interesting to see if that changes with some of the consultations that are going on, because obviously smaller businesses, we're piling a lot onto smaller businesses at the moment. So whether that might be one little thing that they might drop and just change that a little bit, we don't know yet, but I would just assume that you are going to need to do it, and then
Yeah.
a Brucey bonus if you don't have to do it.
Yeah, and talking about extra pressure that we're putting on smaller businesses, we're moving on to SSP. Now, this is the biggest change in statutory sick pay since I think it was introduced. And unfortunately, I'm old enough to have been working when this was introduced. So it's a big change, and I think employers need to be aware, because it's hyped up in the media, and the media are telling our employees exactly what they're entitled to. So we're going to have a little bit of a dive through this. So what does it actually mean? So let's see, let's take a breath. Payable from the first day of absence. Right now, we have to wait until day 4 for SSP. So we're removing those waiting days. Absence will be paid from day 1, so that's an additional cost for employers. Lower earnings limit, which has been an exclusion. So if employees were earning below the lower earnings limit, so currently £125, from April it'll be £129 a week. If they were earning below that, they weren't entitled. They are now going to be entitled, because they are going to get either the flat rate of SSP or 80% of their average weekly earnings for each day of absence. Other exclusions remain. So if somebody is within that pregnancy window, for example, or in legal custody, then those exclusions still remain. Nothing else has changed. And there are some specific transition rules, which I will cover off for you, but they're a little bit challenging. But I think not only do payroll have to be aware of what we're paying, HR need to be aware of the process changes and the procedure changes. So I'm going to hand over to my lovely HR colleagues to expand on that for you.
Yeah, so obviously absence reporting, the process of following that will become more important than ever, as well as those return to work chats. So I've always, all through my career, I've had managers going, oh, it's only one day, I don't need to do a return to work interview. And it's like, yes, you absolutely do need to do it. They are actually more important, because you're almost asking that individual, why have you been off? This is what the consequences of you being off last minute has done for the colleagues. So definitely make sure that your managers are keeping up to date with their return to work conversations, because they are going to be a lot more important. You might find that presenteeism decreases, and that's where people come into work when they're actually not feeling very well. That will probably, people will now take that time off because they will get paid for it. A knock-on effect of that is that you might actually get less absences from that knock-on effect of people coming in when they're not well and affecting everybody else that's around them. So, but I think generally absenteeism is going to increase, which will obviously create more cost for you as a business if you have to cover that employee, as well as paying for their SSP on top of that. So you're almost getting a bit of a double whammy there if you've got a business where you have to maintain a certain amount of cover within your business. So I think usually, as usual, it's going to be those smaller businesses that is going to be hit harder by this, in that they either have less service because they're not able to cover that individual, and then they're also having to pay their SSP costs on top of that. So
I'm going to pick up, there's been a few questions come through on this, as I thought there might be, and some more questions will be answered as I go through, but I'm going to pick up on a few that we have in here.
Brilliant.
Do we still have qualifying days for SSP? Yes, we absolutely do, because that will determine the number of days. If you're paying over a week, for example, the rate at which you're paying, is it a 5/7 or is it 5/5 or whatever? Different for casual workers who don't have full employment contracts? Well, what do you mean by if they don't have full employment contracts? If they're employees and they're working, they're entitled. Your average weekly earning.
because I've actually worked with casual workers on casual agreements rather than employment contracts. So in this case, although we don't have specific guidance yet, if you are reporting sick on a scheduled shift as a casual worker, so if you're on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday campaign or anything similar like that, then you would likely be reporting sick, and that would count as a sickness to the company. We don't know fully yet if that will count towards SSP. I would hazard that it may do. However, if you are off on a period of extended sickness because of the casual nature, it's unlikely. So it's going to be a bit more complicated if you're working with casual agreements, and we're likely to get information on that quite late because they're not used as commonly anymore. So again, it's another one to keep an eye out for, but it's a tricky one, and I'm going to guess that we'll probably not get a full idea of that until after implementation, naturally.
Yeah, guidance is still being published on this.
Yeah.
There was a whole load more that came out last week. Do we know if fit notes are still from day 7? Nothing else has changed.
Yes.
So yes, what is classed as an absence? Actually, if you come in and work 1 minute on a day, that's classed as an absence. That was that one. If somebody is only off for 1 or 2 days, are they still entitled to SSP? Yes, absolutely, for each day of absence. So I'm going to move on a little bit because I think we could continue with the questions for a while, but hopefully the next couple of slides are going to answer some of this for us. So payments from day 1 of absence, we're removing the link to the LEL. So that basically means anybody that is off sick will be entitled to SSP, any employee. So workers are slightly different, but employee will be entitled to SSP at 80% or the flat rate for SSP, whichever is the lower. All employees, as said, regardless of earnings, will now be due. And there are transition rules. So let's keep going with that. There will no longer be any waiting days. So if you have a scheme, if you have an occupational scheme that pays from day 4, that's absolutely fine. But you are now going to be paying SSP from day 1. A PIW, so a period of incapacity for work, as has been haunting us for many, many years, is now going to be triggered as 1 day. And it will continue to link back to previous absences as before. But whereas when we were linking before, any absence within that 56 days had to be another full PIW of 4 days, it now only has to be 1 day. So the linking rules are still there. It's just that PIW that triggers it is now only 1 day. And so I've just mentioned all of that, but what we need to remember is the average weekly earnings calculation is still done off the earliest of those linked periods. We still have an entitlement, maximum entitlement of 28 weeks linked over 3 years. That remains as the maximum entitlement for SSP. That hasn't changed. In fact, what we could caveat all of this with is the only change is that it's now paid from day 1 and it's at 80% of average weekly earnings or the flat rate, whichever is the lowest. Right. We've got some FAQs, and from the questions that are coming through here, I think we can happily add to all of these FAQs. Can the employer claim back the additional costs that they will incur? No, there's no provision for this to be claimed back in the way. Historically, when SSP was introduced, you could and you can claim back for other parental leave payments. You can't do anything around claiming these costs back. So as the ladies have said, it is definitely going to be an additional cost. What about those employees who are already off sick but earning below the LEL? I'm going to cover that in a minute under transition rules. I've mentioned that a PIW will be formed, but it'll be from 1 day. Does the LEL change apply to statutory parental pay? Not yet, would be my answer. So my brain says if it works for this, why would they not? But right now, it's only applying to SSP. Does the employer have to use the new rules? Yeah, sorry, can't pick and choose on that one. What you choose to do for occupational is completely separate, but statutory is the minimum amount that you have to pay. Qualifying days still matter. Yes, they do still matter. There is no change to that requirement at all. And will this lead to a cultural change? Okay, I'm going to hand over to my friends in HR for this one, because I think the answer might be yes.
I think you might be right. What do you
Yeah.
think, Alicia?
Yeah, it's sickness and sick pay is one of the things that a lot of employees are generally quite clued in on. Generally, there's a fair bit of awareness around entitlement, and with everything that the Employment Rights Act is hitting in the news, it's likely that we're going to see an uptick in people being more aware of what they're entitled to and more confident having those discussions. So it might hopefully open up some positive discussions around people who maybe are more comfortable disclosing when they're unwell or struggling with something on a ongoing basis. But also we're likely to see people who are more confident in saying, no, this is what I'm entitled to. So there also might be some more pushback that we have to deal with in those conversations. So like Gwennon said, it's making sure that those return to work meetings and those wellbeing conversations are happening to help keep that relationship positive, so that cultural change is something we can use to enhance everything rather than it becoming.
Yeah, and I've got a feeling that there'll be a slight sort of, maybe not cultural in business terms, but cultural in worldwide terms, in that, you know, that you're off on a night out and you're thinking, oh, I've got to leave early because I've got to work tomorrow, and you know, everybody go, oh, don't worry about it, you can call in sick, you'll get paid now. You know, it's that sort of people sort of encouraging people to sort of take those one day off sick, just because they don't fancy coming into work. They'll feel that it's an entitlement now, so they'll be more likely to take them, and that's where those return to work conversations come in handy, in that, you know, we are setting our expectations in saying that is not a good way of reacting.
So we've got a few more questions.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously. Does it still have to be a period of 4 days sickness? I think I've answered that. No, it doesn't. As this change comes into effect from April, do we deduct sickness in arrears? Would we apply this in April for March's sickness? No, this is only effective from absence starting on or after the 6th of April. So what we have suggested is that people actually report absence for April in 2 periods if they're off for the entire month. So from the 1st to the 5th and from the 6th to the 30th, because there are different rules that apply. When you're paying company sick pay, should we show 2 lines on the payslip? Entirely up to you how you actually display it. But what you want to do is make sure that you have records to support for the Fair Work Agency that you have paid SSP. Links absence remains the same. There is a maximum of SSP. Yes, we've said it's 28 weeks. How would we calculate the average weekly earnings if the employee is off on their first day? The same rules apply. It is what the expected earnings would have been. Qualifying days, I will try and come back to at the end, but I am aware that we have very much a lot of content still to go through. So I'll come back to those questions and try and reply to more. So there are transition rules, and these are the real basic transition rules. What happens if? So if somebody is off sick pre 6th of April and their earnings are below the LEL, They won't have been entitled to SSP before, but they will be from the 6th of April. So you do that calculation and you pay them from the 6th of April. Again, hence why we are suggesting that you split those absence periods for April. If they were receiving SSP, there is a quirk to the new calculation, which basically says if somebody is earning up to £154.05, I think, paying 80% of their average weekly earnings would pay them at a lower rate than the new statutory limit of 123.25. They will be protected. So if they're already getting the flat rate of statutory of 118.75, they will continue to get that flat rate, even though it's above the 80%, until they come back to work. And coming back to work is just one day, one break, and they will go back and effectively be worse off. So if they come back for a day and then they go off sick again, they will effectively now get 80%, which could be less than the basic rate. And what to do if they're on a waiting day. So if they happen to be sick over Easter, and of course all of this kicks in over that public holiday weekend, which we love. If they're serving waiting days on the 5th, then they're still on a waiting day on the 6th. They become eligible for SSP on the 6th. So we can ignore the 5th, but we need to pay from the 6th. Okay, I'm going to breathe and see if I can catch up with some more questions, but we're now going to have a look at what's coming later in 2026. As if we haven't had enough to manage, we still have additional information that's coming through. So what have we got? Alicio, August.
Oh no, this one's me again.
Oh, this one's you. I'm rubbish at this. Absolute rubbish.
It's fine. So in August, we've got one change coming, and again, it's to trade union changes. So the overall electronic workplace balloting is likely to change. So what that will mean is that there'll be an increase in the speed and ease of union ballots. So they're making things a lot easier for unions to be able to ballot their members. So it will require HR to act more quickly. So with all of the changes that are happening, the balloting will be easier. The requirements for having industrial action will reduce. Then they'll have less time to give notice to the employer, and then there are less rules around those strikes. So everything is building up to making it a lot easier for trade unions to actually have strike actions. So what that means for us is that we'll have to be a little bit more agile in responding to those notices that come through. So that, in short, unions will have more flexible tools to organise ballots. HR will need to stay agile, informed, and ready to engage earlier in the process. So it's just all of it is building up to making it easier for trade unions to strike, and so that they've got a little bit more power. So just watch this space.
So that was August. October. Nothing much going on in October. Look at this one. Here we go.
I am going to hand over to Licia for this one.
Take a breath. So yeah, there's going to be some new regulations that will establish another body. So there's going to be the Adult Social Care Negotiating Body established, both to do with fair pay, but also it's going to look at setting sort of the national paying conditions for people working in adult social care. And there's a consultation for that running in September. So a lot of it is going to be about reforming how 0 hours works in that sector. And again, workers' rights will be a focus of it, strengthening those. So good to keep an eye out after September when we've got some information on that. But as you can imagine, quick turnaround if the consultation is September and at the moment implementation is October. So if you're in that sector, it's something to start already looking at. What are you doing? What's the rumblings and things like that, so that you can get an idea of what you might need to do. And then in the public sector, they are reintroducing the rules to the 2-tier code, basically. so that if you have or win a public sector contract with the NHS or anyone like that, again, new staff are going to have to be given terms and conditions that are fair and no less favourable than staff who transferred over or are pre-existing, to try and reduce that two-tier workforce. So this means if you're in that sector, again, your contracts, you're going to need to look over those, the agreements that you're making, to ensure that you are prepped and ready. And anything involving contracts takes a while, so it might already be worth looking over and highlighting any areas where there are disparities, so that you know where you might be hit with that one.
And then we've got the tipping laws that are coming in, which are tightening. Sorry, the laws are tightening. So we've already got a requirement to produce written tips policy, but these reforms will make the obligation to around tip policy. Oh, I can't talk. Policies more onerous. So that will mean is that employers will need to review and consult on their tips policy at least once every 3 years. So it's sort of mirroring what we have to do with auto enrolment with pensions. So every 3 years they have to go back to the employees and consult on their tipping policy. But they also will need to have I can't say the word, anonymized summary of the views expressed in that consultation available to all workers. So just a slight change there, but again, more onus, more things for smaller businesses and to be able to have to deal with all the time. So it's adding extra,
particularly
extra
for those smaller hospitality.
Yeah. Who generally
businesses.
don't have HR support. So
No.
you know, it's more onerous on business owners, I would think, in that area rather than on HR. And then again, we've got more changes coming to trade union representation. So we as employers will now have a duty to inform workers of their rights to join a trade union. We're not sure of what that expectation is yet. Can it be just verbal? Do you have to write it into your contracts? Do you have to write it in your onboarding, in handbooks? So we just need to watch out for this, but I would suggest that you have it somewhere in writing so that it actually proves that you've done it. So relying on verbal, it probably isn't going to be enough. So it might need to be either in the offer letter, it might need to be on your onboarding documentation. What we don't know is whether that needs to be publicly available to employees all the time or to be repeated at a point. So it's just a bit of we're waiting for guidance on that one to come through.
And I think it's actually fair to say that all the stuff for October and beyond, we are waiting on clarification, on guidance, on consultations to finish. So we will be revisiting this and doing another webinar, likely to be in the summer when we have more information. Yeah.
And then this is also when the rights of the strengthened right of access comes in as well. Again, still not a lot of detail on that one. So we're informing of you of it, but we'll give you more information when we know more. And I think that one's part of the consultations that are going on.
Yes.
So we'll see what comes out of those ones. Then I'll hand over back to you, Alicia.
A lot of watch this space with these, really.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Couple of bits to bear in mind that are hopefully purely policy changes, but good to review resources and things as well. In October, the onus for us as employers to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment becomes all reasonable steps. It seems like a minor change in wording, but it's going to be a big increase in the responsibility of employers and the way that then will be dealt with. So good to get ahead of that one. However, at the moment, as we've said, we don't know what they mean by that, to what extent that word is sort of applied. So I watch this space, but bear it in mind moving forward. And on the harassment section, but encompassing all types of harassment, there's going to be an introduction of an obligation for employers not to permit harassment of employees through third parties. So we as employers are then responsible for the actions of those third parties and what we do in response to it. So if you work closely with different companies you sell to, customers, clients, anything like that, it's going to be a case of communicating that expectation, making it in any contracts or service level agreements. And that one is really important to know about at the moment, because changing a contract that goes out to customers and clients and things like that is not a quick process. So sorry, go ahead, Gwenna.
I was just going to say, this is where HR are actually veering off HR into sort of commercial law. So it's very unusual for us to be involved in our contracts with third parties or with customers. So it's a very unusual one. Just be careful what you're writing in your policy, that your commercial contracts back that up, so that if you're putting something in a policy that says this is what we will do if you are sexually harassed by a third party, just make sure that the commercial contract allows you to be able to do that. So first time ever I've been involved in having a conversation with our commercial team around what gets put in a contract. So just bear that in mind, and thinking about that does take a long time to change any of those contracts. So absolutely start thinking about that now. Okay,
and there is more. I am aware we are getting really quite tight on time now. So again, these are pieces of information. We know they're coming through, but we don't actually really have any details on these just yet, unless you ladies are going to tell me different. I think we're still in a waiting pattern for these.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So it's just rather than going through them in any detail with you, I think the best thing is just to let you know that they're happening, and a lot of these are still in consultation. So let's just see what comes out of those consultations, and we'll probably very likely do another one, won't we, Claire? So
I think we're going to have to as soon as this data starts coming out, because look at this lot then. So that's what's coming in 2026, and we don't know what's coming in detail in 6 months' time. So that's October, but they have given us a timeline for what's coming in 2027 as well, for which we actually know even less, to be fair. So, what's happening? There are some changes from the 1st of January that we do know a little bit about. So I think, Gwennan, you have some comments on this one.
Yeah, I think this is the big one that we know will definitely happen. It's been backwards and forwards from the House of Lords to the House of Commons. So we know that this one is definitely in there. So anybody, if you think about it, anybody that you employ from July this year, by January 2027 will have full employment rights, and you will not be able to unfairly dismiss them. They will have those protection in place, and then that goes along with everybody else in your business. So what you need to start thinking about now is, have you got anybody within your business that there is questions over? Start thinking about whether you're needing to look at their performances at this point in time. And also anybody that you employ from July 2026, have you got probationary periods in place? Have you got expectations of what managers should be doing and how they should be reviewing them? There was an earlier question around whether people should change their probationary periods to 5 months rather than 6 months. I would keep it at 6 months, but just make sure that you're reviewing them before that you get to that 6 months point. So what normally tends to happen is, I'm sure every HR person on this call will have had this, where you've got somebody a week before their 6 months probation comes up and a manager goes, oh, I want to extend their probation, I'm really not happy with them, and it's the first time you're hearing about it. That is going to cause you headaches going forward. So what I would suggest is that you train your managers in looking at the performance of new starters very early on. For example, we have within Ciphr, we have what we call a 135. You review them at month 1, you review them at month 3, and then you review them again at month 5. That gives you the opportunity to pick up and try and improve that performance within that time. Because if you're leaving it to the last minute, you've already left it too late.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Those are the ones we know about.
Yeah.
But look, there's all of this coming through for later in 2027. Again, we don't have any details in any value of any value at this point. I think we also need to, understand that, gender pay gap and menopause reporting is expected to become mandatory. We don't have confirmation, is expected. We also know that parental leave is currently undergoing a consultation, but we have no more information on that either. Flexible working requests. There's a whole raft of stuff that we actually don't know about. So as and when we do, I think that the answer here is watch this space, as we've said time and time again. We will be doing webinars on this subject probably every 4 months or so, right through its whole implementation, to keep everybody informed. As and when that guidance comes out, we will jump on a webinar and add value for everybody. Next steps for HR and payroll. Okay, I'm going to start this one. Payroll, SSP changes, communications, occupational schemes review, register for our year-end webinar, which is next week, and we will be doing a more detailed SSP dive on that one. We've got a bit more time on that one to pick that up. There are also a whole load of questions around SSP that I'm going to pick up. I will try and answer outside of this. We simply don't have time now, but I will also include some of those as FAQs into the end of year webinar. Updates ongoing from parental consultations, as I've already mentioned. We don't know where that's going, but I could hazard a few guesses. Benefits in kind. Yeah, there's big changes going on for benefits in kind. They don't relate to Employment Rights Act at all, but they are massive. So if you actually, and they aren't just an extension of the payrolling that we do already, they do impact HR in quite a big way. And anybody that uses benefits of any sort, log on or register to join our webinar on that one on the 16th of April, where Alicia and I will be taking you through that. Top tip for me for payroll: plan as far in advance as you can to reduce stress. We know where those key points are going to be. April is going to be fun and games. Everybody will be expecting, and watch this one, everybody will be expecting SSP to be paid in April if they've been off. But bear in mind that generally we pay absence in arrears. So in April, we'll be processing March's absence, which doesn't change. So these changes are likely only to come through to employees from May. That may be a communication piece of information that, to reduce the stress, get that data out there. Over to you, ladies, for HR.
Yes, so we've got a number of consultations that have opened over the last month. So right now we're looking at updates on flexible working, fire and rehire, trade union recognition, tipping laws, agency work and umbrella companies, all sort of in the April-May time when those consultations come to an end. Possibly more likely June once they've had time to put together the report. But if you keep an eye out for those, if you have any questions on any of those, it's likely more clarity will be coming through there. And we just wanted to highlight a reminder, because we know that there's going to be a lot of anxiety around that performance management and probation piece. Again, like we've said, just start thinking about it, start looking at processes and start building up your confidence in how you're going to handle that on the transition. I know there are a few HR questions in the chat waiting for answers as well, so I'm sure we will do our best to get some bits out for those too.
And I think just to finish off this one for you, we put this slide in as just a reference slide. At a glance, you can see what's coming, when's it coming. You can print this out, or I think we're going to make it available as a PDF download. just so that you can pin it on your wall and just tick them off as you get to those days or you've dealt with it. There's an awful lot coming, and we have to manage this in bite-sized chunks or our brains are all just going to explode. With so much coming through in such rapid succession, planning is definitely going to be the key. So we know there are some questions here, so we are literally out of time. Catherine, can I ask, do we have access to answer these questions outside of this forum?
Yeah, so all of those questions have been saved. Sorry, I should say, Alicia, Claire, Gwennon, you've done an amazing job of preparing for this webinar and delivering so much information and building all of the questions we've had so far. So before I talk about anything else, amazing job, well done, guys. Hopefully everybody on the call has really appreciated how much hard work they've put in, and how lucky we are at Ciphr to have you guys on our team and processing all this for us. So yes, all these questions have been captured, and if Claire, Gwennon and Alicia are agreeable and can find the time to work through them and produce some answers, we will get those out to you. So the email with the video recording will come out today. We can definitely deliver that today. I think the answers are going to take us a little bit more time to turn around, just because we need to go away and do a little bit of research, compile them all into a document. So leave those with us, and we could optimistically try and get them out at the end of this week. It might take us a little bit longer, but please bear with us. And bear in mind, we're not employment law experts. We are HR and compliance people just like you. So we're doing the best we can to research them. So yes, very happy to collate those and work with the team to get the questions and answers back to you, but just be patient with us. We will do our best.
And Catherine, are there links for people that might want to join the end of year training next week or the benefits in kind webinar?
Yeah, so if anybody wants to join those and miss the on-screen buttons, flick over to the public chat tab, and the 3 most recent posts from me, you'll see a link for the year-end webinar, one for the benefit in kind webinar, and also a link to the PDF download of that timeline that we shared last. We'll put that timeline in today's email and with the question and answer email that we'll send out as follow-up as well.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much for your support on this one, Catherine. It's been a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, that's putting it mildly. To say this is going to be a challenging year for HR and payroll would be putting it mildly. To answer Wendy's question, will everyone get the email question replies? Yes, we'll just do a blanket email to everyone who registered with like a PDF attachment of all the questions and answers. It's not going to look super sophisticated. It's not going to have your name next to every question, but we'll try and group them thematically so that you can browse through them to the bits that are more relevant to you. Okay, so with that, we have hit 12:02. Thank you to everyone who's stayed with us so far. There's lots of links in the chat that you guys can pick up on if you want to join us at a future webinar, or you should be getting our webinar invitations by email, or you can find us on LinkedIn. That's a really great place to follow us. If you want to find out anything more about any of our solutions, you can opt in using the exit form on your screen after this broadcast, or you can reach us at info@ciphr.com. So thanks again, everyone, for attending and for your thoughtful questions today. Thank you, Alicia, Claire and Gwennon. You did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate all the hard work you put into this. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.